get it started at 7 o'clock and go around the room for roll.
Kimberly Watts. Jill Ingber.
David Schwartz.
Martha Schroed.
Jill Planter.
Rick Poland.
Sheldon Cohn.
Joe Rozell.
And Mike Gray. Approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Can I suggest that we move the 6, the site plan review, ahead of the other one, ahead of the TIA consideration?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the only problem with that is that the TIA is here ready to go, and
Okay.
the gentleman for item 6 is not.
Okay, I withdraw the suggestion.
Sorry, was there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Approval of minutes, July 22nd, 2019.
So moved.
I notice I wasn't here, but I noticed a typo in Miss Ingber's name on the first page.
INGBER,
Yeah.
they missed, okay.
And is this traffic study group the TSA?
TIA,
Okay, well,
Traffic
page,
Improvement Association.
yeah, page, third page. Near the end of the big paragraph.
Is that the abbreviation for traffic study?
Group.
Yeah, what it basically is it's TIA, it's Traffic Improvement Association, so we'll change that.
I'll accept those changes into my motion.
Wait,
Wait, there's more.
And anything else, anyone?
my name is misspelled repeatedly. There's no C in Schroed. So it's 1, 2, 3, at least 3 times on the
I've got it, I'll go through it, I didn't have it changed.
Okay.
We have a new minute format and a new minutes taker who is taking them off of the tape for this commission. So this was her first time doing it, so we will try to get it done more expeditiously so that this does not happen.
I'm wondering for mine if she got it off the website. I noticed like my name on the city website
Probably, is it spelled wrong there?
has an A, yeah.
That gives me one more thing to take care of, thank you though.
Mine was
Nothing
wrong
to
for a
do
year,
with
if it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Michael White.
Oh,
You were Michael White
For a long time.
should have just changed
Yeah, it would have been easy.
Would've taken less
it. Make
time.
it easier for other people.
We like
Okay.
Michael White.
I have those changes.
Motion?
Motion's been made and seconded, I believe.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes. Okay, for the presentation and information from the TIA, we're going to talk a little bit about how the format is going to work for this. We're going to have the presentation. We'll go around the room with Planning Commission for questions and comments. We'll open up for public participation. If there's any questions or comments, we're going to kind of take them all down and go back and ask the gentleman from the TIA kind of one at a time so we don't get into a sort of public debate with folks that are here.
What, Mike, what is the outcome tonight?
So there is
Is
no
it just
outcome.
receiving the report? Is it approving the report? Is it recommending anything to the city commission, or
There is,
just
no-
receiving information?
Receiving information and offering an opinion to the city commission. So there is really no action here. There's no plan. There's no plans for road reduction. This is purely informational at this point. So we are to receive the information and make a recommendation if we want to continue to learn. Is that fair, Amy? Okay. I think we're ready to go.
I'll stand up. I'm fighting back problems, so I might have to sit down when we get to questions, but I can get through this part. But my name is Pat Cawley. I'm traffic engineer at Transportation Improvement Association. I heard Traffic Improvement Association. We've changed our name a few times over the years. Right now, we're Transportation Improvement Association, just to kind of demonstrate that we're multimodal. We don't just deal with automobiles. We deal with all modes of transportation. So that's the reason for the recent name change. And if you're not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization. We work with approximately 60 communities in southeast Michigan, primarily in Oakland County. That's where we were formed back in the 60s. So we work with a lot of communities in Oakland County. We work very closely with the Road Commission for Oakland County. And we focus on traffic safety and the 3 E's of traffic safety, where we have engineering, which is the part I do, provide engineering services to the communities. We do education programs. One of the big things we're doing now is distracted driving, trying to get the word out on distracted driving and particularly reduce distracted driving by teen drivers. And then we also have the enforcement aspect. We administer the grant in Oakland County for seatbelt and drunk driving enforcement through the local agencies. We work as a pass-through for the funds that come from the Office of Highway Safety Planning. So that's just a little bit about us. I titled the presentation tonight Road Diets. That's kind of a common nickname now for projects such as this, where you're reducing the geometry of the roadway, be that the laneage itself or just the width of the lanes. But in general, it can be any of those things. The common project you'll see is going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And here's an example here. You have 2 lanes in each direction. You're going to lower it down to 1 lane in each direction and install a center left turn lane. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about when I say typical candidates here is that 4 to 3 conversion, since that's the common project that's undertaken. Usually when you look at a corridor like that, you're looking at something that has an average daily traffic of 20,000 vehicles per day or less. A lot of people use different numbers. Some out west, Seattle, Portland, they might be entertaining projects like this with 22,000 vehicles per day. But the most common rule of thumb is looking at 20,000 vehicles per day. What actually comes into play is the hourly directional flow. So how much, if you think of it like a pipe, how much traffic can you get through in 1 lane? And Federal Highway actually has a requirement, if you're going to use federal funds on a project like this, any corridor that has over 15,000 vehicles per day, you're going to need to do a more advanced analysis. Something that you often look at, again, the 4 to 3, significant left turn volumes or a high density of access points, meaning there's a lot of driveways and side streets that people are going to have the opportunity to turn left on. And, it's all driven by that center left turn lane. It's beneficial in that case. The other thing you might look at is crash history. Again, if you have a lot of left turn related crashes, that could be, head-on left turn crashes, could be side swipe crashes where people are trying to avoid somebody stopped to turn left, or it could be a rear end crash if somebody's stopped and does get hit from behind. The other thing you could look at are pedestrian and bicycle accidents. I actually worked on one project where that was the focus. We wanted to change the geometry to put in pedestrian crossing islands, particularly at bus stops that had a large number of passengers getting on and off and crossing the street there. There was a history of pedestrian crashes there. So the goal of these projects, usually what I'm looking at, and like I started off with TIA's mission, is our number 1 goal is to improve safety. And that's usually what I'm looking for when I look at a candidate project. I bike on occasion. I'm not a bike advocate. I can see the benefit of making a corridor multimodal and allowing it, better non-motorized mobility. But my chief concern is safety, honestly. And usually what you want to do, you're going to do this conversion but you want to maintain operations. And that's, you're going to have the same travel time. You're not going to slow everything down to a crawl through the corridor, but you want it to remain essentially the same. And usually the way you can achieve this is you have a corridor like this that's signalized intersections throughout. What's controlling flow through that whole corridor are the signalized intersections. So if you can get the signalized intersections to operate at a good level of service, you can get everybody through the corridor still. Again, thinking of that analogy of the lane of traffic as a pipe. You have enough capacity to go through the pipe, but when you get to a valve, you have enough capacity to get through that. So that's what you want to do. And what you also want to see are volumes that remain about the same, or possibly they could increase. A lot of times, projects like this are installed. They get some streetscape enhancements that go along with it. Business picks up, and you can actually see volumes that increase. The common fear is you're going to do that, and traffic is going to vacate. People are going to say, oh, I can't get through, so I don't want to use that route anymore. You typically don't see that as long as, like I say, if those intersections are operating properly, you're not going to see that. So the last point is you're going to provide space for other features. Again, common treatment is to go from 4 to 3, install a bike lane on the outside lanes, but there's other things you can do. You can install parking. You could narrow it up and install green space. And some of this can be seen if you look at the projects that Ferndale did. The first go-round they did on Hilton was driven by parking. They wanted to increase parking throughout the corridor. They've now come full circle where they have the 3 lanes with the bike lanes, and they want to reduce it even more. In recent years, they've talked about reducing it down to 2 lanes. So the benefits of a 4 to 3, like I had mentioned, you're going to reduce crashes. Those types that are mitigated by a left turn lane are usually what is going to be reduced. There are studies that show the reduction. It could be, anywhere from 15 to 60%. You usually figure you're going to get about a 40% reduction in crashes. That doesn't necessarily take care of all those crashes, but it does reduce it because you've taken away those incidents of vehicles coming up on stop turning vehicles, and gives them less maneuvers they have to make. You're usually going to see a uniform speed. You have kind of a pace setter driving through the corridor. You can't go faster than the fastest car in that queue of traffic that you're in. And then what we talked about, repurposing that excess pavement area with, however you want to do that. One of the benefits of the two-way center turn lane, and this, it's a little bit blurry, I apologize, but I think this is a good diagram that shows when you get those left turn vehicles out of the inside lanes and into one continuous two-way left turn lane, you improve the sight distance for those vehicles that are turning left. They don't have to play peekaboo around, those vehicles that are in lane 2 and you got somebody in lane 1 that's passing them. So that's where you see the real benefit as far as the left turn crashes themselves, and obviously you eliminate the side swipe crashes of people passing and the rear end crashes since they're out of the moving through lane. So where you get better traffic calming or speeds in the corridor, again, like I mentioned, you get that pace setter vehicle that makes speeds more uniform throughout the corridor. Whenever you narrow lanes, you usually get a reduction in driver speed. that perception that they don't have as much room causes them to slow down. It's usually only a minor decrease in speed, but it is something that you'll see if you go from, say, a 12-foot lane to a 10-foot lane. And then with what's usually put in the, other features, the bike lane, the parking, or if you're doing some streetscape, you again get that perceived higher speed based on the optical, noise that people see as they drive by. They think they're going faster as they pass certain objects and realize their speed is higher than they would think. Just an example here of repurposing the pavement. Again, not adding non-motorized facilities is a common approach. This actually is a shot of the project I mentioned that, we were trying to mitigate some pedestrian crashes. Here you've installed the center turn lane, you've put in bike lanes, and you put in an island in the middle to break up that crossing. Other things you can do, add parking. You could, this does work. You could add parking on these outsides if that was desired in the corridor. This generally is 5 to 6 feet. Parking lane is 7 to 8 feet. You might have to change the width here on these lanes, but it's something that could be considered on a project if that's important. And you also could, just bring the curb out, increase the green space in the tree lawn area, and reduce impervious pavement and runoff. So the studies that we completed last year, we looked at a couple different things. We looked at Coolidge from 696 all the way up to 12 Mile, and part of that was implemented by Berkeley between 11 and 12 Mile. And then the other thing we've looked at is 11 Mile Road from Greenfield over to Woodward. In this case, daily traffic's roughly 16,500 vehicles per day. That hourly directional traffic that I'd look at is around 750 vehicles. Usually the rule of thumb I'm looking at, if I'm just kind of doing a high view of a project like this, is that under 800. If it's under 800 in my mind, I can get good operations, and I'm basing that again on one lane of traffic in an urban setting is going to carry about 1,600 vehicles per hour. 800, you cut that in half, you're at a good level of service. So that's just kind of my rule of thumb. And then in this case, you have a high driveway density, particularly at the east end between Coolidge and Woodward. You have a lot of residential frontage that has driveways directly onto the roadway, so you got a lot of them. And then just looking at the crashes over 3 years, there's about 45 that were the type that could be mitigated by a center left turn lane. So there'd be those 15 crashes per year and whatever crash reduction you would want. Looking at the 16,500 again, you're over that 15,000 vehicle per day threshold that Federal Highway Administration is looking at. So what we would do is a synchro analysis would be needed. Could be a different tool, but that's the most common one. So in this case, we did a synchro analysis. Again, that's a traffic tool. It's a tool more for optimizing traffic signals, their cycle time and offset, but it does have a component that allows you to do a simulation, and you could model this. So you could play with different geometries and get back travel times or level of service is really what you're looking at. You want to get intersection level of service and get good results in those cases. In this case, we looked at that The existing intersections were, level of service between A and D, and the level of service are just like grades in school. A D, you're still passing. Your parents are not happy with you, but you're still passing. And then when we look at the projected level of service, again, we're getting similar levels of service. We're getting A through E, and the E in these cases is actually looking at Coolidge and 11 Mile. Since Coolidge had already been advanced, when this was modeled, it was looked at Coolidge with the reduced geometry, 11 Mile with the reduced geometry. And obviously you're going to have some difficulties when you choke down both legs of that intersection. What I discussed in the report a little bit is a way to mitigate that. Again, if you're thinking of bike lanes going through there, the way to do that is, you could drop the bike lane. The bikes would have to go in a shared condition as they go through the intersection. Not a preferred way to handle it, but it still works and is a common approach. The Coolidge segment, now south of 11 Mile, it's a little bit higher volume. And actually the volume increases the closer you get to 696 as, house is empty and they access 696 to go to work. You get higher volumes down at 696. If you look at the daily volumes, certainly they're above what you'd look at, 20,000 as a threshold. But we're doing the full synchro analysis for the full corridor, seeing if it works. Again, it works up to a point, south of Lincoln. In that case, what I had in the recommendations was you go several hundred feet north of 696 and then develop the 3-lane section, and it will support it. Some frequently asked questions and concerns. A lot of times when you do a project, these are the type of issues you'll hear. It's counterintuitive. You're going to reduce the laneage, so people say, oh, speeds are going to be greatly reduced. Traffic is going to crawl. We're not going to be able to go through. Again, if you properly design the intersections and have good signal timing, it should have minimal effect. Often get asked, is traffic going to cut through neighborhood streets? What you do see is sometimes people get that perceived, okay, this is reduced, I'm not going to be able to get through, I'll use the side streets. They use the side streets and realize the travel time to go down there isn't a whole lot more beneficial than staying on the main street, and they return back. Part of what we're tasked to do in Berkeley this fall, we did a lot of neighborhood counts as well as Coolidge counts in the spring, and we're going to come back 6 months later, measure them again, and see what the differences are. From what I have just observed anecdotally on the side streets, there's not a big increase in traffic. Again, I think when it first opened, there was some people cutting down the side streets, but I think it's kind of normalized now and got back. I guess I'll know more in October, but.
Let me ask you something, since you brought up Berkeley, and you talked about safety. How is it that it can be safe to take a lane away from somebody in the middle of an intersection and force them to merge at 11 Mile and Coolidge? You're in that right lane, it disappears in the intersection. Now, what are you supposed to do? There's no opportunity for folks to do that. At our expense, we've had to now put signage up along Coolidge telling people, hey, this lane's going away, plan accordingly. But it's dangerous. And our police have responded to a number of accidents at that intersection. Why isn't, since they rushed ahead and went and did this and didn't wait for anybody else, why isn't that merger point moved up on Coolidge Road north of 11 Mile? Why not allow someone to continue through the intersection in that right lane and then merge them in? Why take it away right at the intersection?
Honestly, you could do that. You do need to provide a good amount of space to do that. They usually, call that kind of an escape lane if somebody blows it and goes through, if you have a exclusive right turn lane and they blow through that, it's going to take, a good amount of space to merge into traffic. So I can't say design-wise whether, they've provided enough space there. I will say I was surprised that they did that when they implemented it too. I think I would have picked it up further north of 11 Mile
Right.
as a distinct project.
Right.
Certainly if you were doing the whole corridor, it would be smoother because the lineage is already transitioned,
Right.
way back from 11 Mile.
And have you studied, since you mentioned Berkeley, have you studied, because our chief tells me that traffic now backs up considerably south of 11 Mile in the morning, as a result of this road diet in Berkeley. So my question is, have you studied the amount of backup, that's occurring as a result of that, and how dieting, say, 11 to 696 would further compound that problem, either pushing these folks off onto the expressway or 8 Mile Road or wherever they're exiting?
So I did look at that. I've actually driven Coolidge a ton in the past 6 months. I got a lot of, I work in Troy, so I cut up this way. And I made that my regular route for a while to go up Coolidge. I hadn't seen that backup. The city contacted me this summer and said, yeah, we're seeing this. I went out there and observed it for 20 minutes, half hour. I didn't see a big backup south of 11 Mile. It seemed like it was clearing every cycle. If there is an issue and I don't see it, well, again, what I'd say is there's adjustments you can make to the signal timing. Part of what we did right after it was implemented was drive out there with RCOC, and they tweaked some of the offsets and signal timing, particularly Catalpa, so you could get better progression. But if there is an issue there, it might require some more extensive signal timing changes, but you could lengthen out the cycle length there. You would have to do it throughout the corridor, but that probably would be the solution. You could lengthen out the cycle length, get more north-south traffic through the intersection, and improve that.
And then lastly, these bike lanes that are now installed in Berkeley, we have a group of seniors that meet at our rec center on Sunday. I went in to talk to them, and they said, Joe, we don't understand these new bike lanes. We don't know what we're supposed to do. And so I'm wondering, do you see an increase in the number of vehicle and bicycle crashes? Because if you think about it, you're in what you think is like the outermost lane, and you don't really anticipate when you're turning right into a driveway, if you don't see anybody on the sidewalk, you kind of think you're in the clear, but maybe in a blind spot or something is whizzing by some cyclists, and now you're either turning into them or they're hitting you. Do you see an increase in the number of contacts between a vehicle and a bike when they're in these road diet situations?
Like I say, I haven't looked at that in particular yet, too early. Certainly at an intersection like that, that's a common crash type, a right hook crash where a vehicle's turning right, doesn't see the bike, and crosses their path. Overall, what you usually see, though, with installing an on-street bike lane is reduced crashes. If they're either riding just in a shared condition or if they're on the sidewalk, there's a lot more conflicts with crossing driveways and side streets themselves. So I would say it's a bit of a trade-off. You may see more of those, but less overall.
Okay. Thank you.
Another common issue you hear about is emergency vehicles will not be able to get through. Again, that depends on the design, but generally in these cases with the center turn lane, the emergency vehicle can ride the center turn lane, bypass traffic. Certainly the the picture I'd showed an example of where we put in the pedestrian islands, the islands become an impediment. Usually, what I've heard feedback-wise is the islands are, they're short duration. You can usually get around the islands. They have to come out of the center left turn lane, pass around the island, but the odds of having a vehicle right at that location that's going to block them is slim. And again, this is something East Point had done down on 9 Mile, was put in some islands, and it's right by their city hall, right by their fire and police. They were concerned with that. One of the adjustments they made in the final design was to shorten that up so they could do that, eliminate that likelihood that there'll be a vehicle there on the island and they won't be able to get through. Another common concern is that you won't be able to pull out of your driveway. Certainly with traffic all in one lane approaching, you do get a tighter pack in the platoon where there won't be, I guess, probably as many opportunities to find a gap. But usually what you find is there's a more consistent gap. At the end of every traffic cycle, going through the platoon's going to go through, there'll be a gap at the end of it that's getting filled by the side streets entering. So again, it's kind of a trade-off. You might not see a gap every 20 seconds. You might have to wait 40 seconds, but then you'll have a healthy gap that'll be there on a consistent basis. Another issue is, my property values will go down. And this is a little bit subjective. It depends on the project and what you're really looking at. In general, if you're talking about traffic calming where you're doing something to the street to reduce traffic, there's been studies that people are attracted to that when they go to buy a house, and they're actually looking for streets like that, and it increases your property value. I tend to think that's a personal preference, and there may or may not be a buyer that's of that mindset. So I would, take that with a grain of salt. As far as in commercial areas, a lot of times where these are put in and they're coupled with streetscape improvements and other things, it does enhance the value of the properties. There's an increase in commercial business. But again, that's all in the detail of what the project is. I think if you're, doing this standalone, it's probably going to make, no difference in property values at all. So I'll turn it over to questions. I think you guys are.
Yeah, we'll start. We'll start here. Thank you. We can start with Joe. Anything else?
Well, I haven't heard one resident that's experienced the diet in Berkeley tell me how much they like it. In fact, I've heard the total opposite of that. And so I've learned over the years to trust my gut, and my gut does not tell me good things about this road diet. The only redeeming value I think it has is the potential to install, opportunities for diverting rainwater out of our sanitary and storm sewer. As we know, the less rain we keep out of the storm system, the less opportunity it has to end up in our basements. But I don't know that outweighs the potential, what I feel is a negative impact on traffic and the sort of compounding effect it would have if we reduced the number of lanes on Coolidge. 11 Mile, I'd want to look at in more detail and potentially study more. I'm more so open to looking at that than I would be at Coolidge.
Thank you. Sheldon.
Okay. Thank you, Joe, for your brevity. Appreciate it. Okay. I've got a number of questions here. Is Coolidge a county road? And is 11 Mile a county road? No, they're neither one of them. So that's, the jurisdiction is between the municipalities involved in terms of paving and all the rest of that stuff. Did they, and I'm using what may be a term of art, and you'll correct me, they both seem to be to some extent arterial, particularly Coolidge north of 11 is to a great extent a business district. Coolidge south of 11, other than a couple pockets, is not a business. Is not business. It's largely residential or abuts residential. 11 Mile between Coolidge and Woodward is almost entirely, again with a couple exceptions for a couple pockets, is almost entirely residential. In my understanding, at least one of the primary benefits is to business community along the area where you do road diet, because it slows down traffic, it makes it more attractive to pedestrians and that sort of stuff. And I don't see that applying to either the Coolidge corridor or the 11 Mile corridor as it applies to Huntington Woods. Do we have any kind of an accident record report in terms of left turn generated accidents along either 11 or Coolidge? Do we have any of that?
Yeah, that was in the report.
Okay.
You know, in general, I don't have it broken down by segment, but that 45 crashes over 3 years, you know, was
Okay.
across all over
Right.
11 Mile.
Okay.
And I'd agree with you as far as Coolidge at the south end. To me, it's got, you know, a different feel, I think, once you get south of Lincoln. For the analysis, you know, I just carried it, you know,
Yeah.
a few hundred feet actually at a proper transition lane, up from 696 and modeled it that way.
Okay.
Just to demonstrate what it would work.
Yeah.
In the,
I would be, and I guess I would concur with what I think Joe said, having to do with moving the transition back south of 11 on northbound Coolidge, which seems to be much, in my unschooled judgment, would seem to be a lot safer than just having the lane end and having people have a choice of either running into the parking dash bike lane. That seems to be, I mean, I haven't gone through it that much. The lane reduction per se, I'll defer to your expertise on it in terms of the quantity of traffic being able to get through. I'm not terribly offended by doing a lane reduction on 11 Mile Road. I just don't see the purpose in terms of contributing to walkability and business sort of stuff. And I guess I'd want to see something about the impervious pavement improvement as far as improving drainage and that sort of stuff. Have we heard anything or had any input from DPW or Public Safety, Hank?
At this point in time, no, because we just received, if we have, I haven't heard it, but you might be able to help you out with that.
Okay.
DPW, their only concern was if you put bollards in for the bike lane to differentiate the bike lane, that they make, that it be able to be plowed. And Public Safety said that it's good for decreasing accidents and decreasing speeds.
Okay. Thank you. What's an enhanced crosswalk?
So, in my mind, that would be something more than just, you know, putting paint on the pavement and signs up. I usually look at a research project. NCHRP 562 is commonly used, and it differentiates into like 3 different segments. If you plot your conditions on this graph, and it'll give you a standard crosswalk. It'll have something that's you know, enhanced where they say yellow, or stop condition, which is red. So if you're up in the red condition, you know, you're gonna look at putting in a full traffic signal or a hawk type pedestrian crossing treatment. When you get in that enhanced area where, you know, they'll say yellow, it might be flashers like the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. You could do, you know, in-street lights, or you could do the simple treatment, which has shown some promise lately, is to put the in-street signs, but not only put them in the middle of the street, but put them at the outside edge of the street and constrain traffic as they go through the crosswalk. Again, that perception of going through the narrow opening slows them down, gets their attention, and they've seen, you know, increases in yielding rates on those.
So if you're talking about 11 Mile, where the speed limit is 30 and if you do 30, you get run over. But I'm just curious in terms of pedestrian bicycle access across into Berkeley. I mean, what are the solutions there that you think are viable? Because 11 miles a throughway, okay? I mean that's what it is. There's no, like I said, there's a couple incidents of businesses, but most of the people are heading through 11 Mile Road. And I'm just curious how you would, if there's a reasonable way to actually get people to respect traffic crossing. I don't mean automobile traffic, I mean pedestrian and bicycle. I'm not being very articulate here. But in terms of bicycle or pedestrian traffic crossing 11 Mile Road without taking their life in their hands. You know, I don't see how you do that. I can see it maybe if you're also doing some road diet. But if you're talking about 4 lanes going across, that strikes me as a risky venture. You know, crossing 11 Mile Road. I don't know if you have any kind of an answer for that.
Well, I was gonna say, if you are talking the 3-lane section, that's what the, you know, where you put the crossing island in, that's a great treatment where, you know, it gives them somewhere to wait and get the gap in the other traffic stream. You're only basically crossing half the roadway at a time. So you cross, you know, the first lane, you wait, you cross the second lane. Again.
So it doesn't work without a center left turn lane, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple instances where you have a 4-lane section, you put that island in, and then you widen the outside curbs to go around it. Again, that's, you know, improved, but like you say, in the 4-lane section where you have 2 moving lanes, what you often get is, you know, what they call the dual threat crash. One vehicle stops, the pedestrian starts to cross the roadway, the other vehicle passes them by and never sees the pedestrian because that stopped vehicle has blocked their view.
Yeah.
So generally, if you have something like that, what you'll do is put in a stop bar or yield bar and pull them back. So if they do stop for the pedestrian, they're going to be far enough back that there's sight distance.
All right. I've seen a couple incidences in Ann Arbor where they've gone to I don't know what the road was before, but basically now it's got a center left turn only, and it's got this little island. It usually, very often near schools. It's got this little island in the middle so you can cross half a street at a time, and that seems to be, at least to me, seems to be a reasonably good solution. Anyway, okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Rick?
All right, I got a couple of questions. The first is, I want to note that I noticed the backup not clearing as of this morning. It definitely didn't clear in just one light cycle. So that might be something to look at again. In terms of our neighboring communities, what's Oak Park doing with this report? Do we know where they're at in reviewing it?
They're waiting for us.
Okay, and then can you speak to Berkeley's process for implementing the Coolidge Road Diet and how they're planning to review that in the coming months and either keep it or do away with it.
Yeah, so they had a series of public meetings. They had, a couple at the church, and just had people come in. They kind of had boards up, of concepts of what they were thinking about doing, and had people come in, ask questions, give feedback. They then went and, did a presentation at council before they approved it. And one of the things that council wanted to see in the project was follow-up afterwards. They were putting it as a pilot project. So what they're looking at is we're going to install it, and then in 2 years, they're going to make a final decision whether it's going to stay. So we did the existing traffic monitoring, and now we're going to go back every 6 months and hit those same locations and see how traffic has changed. And part of what we were going to look at was the intersections, and again, look at delay. One of the questions there as well is, is there excessive left turn delay now at those signalized intersections that it might be beneficial to put in a left turn phase?
Got it. And then in terms of funding sources, how did Berkeley fund their diet, and what opportunities are there for grants with this?
I believe they funded it themselves through the DDA. The DDA was the champion for the project, but you could do a project like that, particularly a 4 to 3 project. You can usually get safety grant funding pretty easily because you do have that demonstrated reduction in crashes with the left turn lane. If you're doing streetscape improvements, you could use the Transportation Alternatives Program or TAP grant funding. That's a good source if you want to, make the corridor more aesthetically pleasing. That, from what I understand, it usually takes a larger match. Because it's so competitive, they usually are looking for projects that overmatch. With the safety funding, it's usually 80-20. You pay 20%, and the federal grant will pay for 80% of it.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
So I would agree with Rick. I have seen the lineup on Coolidge going north at the lighted 11 mile. I have also been where I have been coming up to that light and had someone go down that right-hand only turn lane and cut in front of me to get over, and because they don't want to wait in the line, and that's obviously illegal and bad driving, but I've seen it, it's personally happened to me, and then I've seen people do it where I'm several cars back multiple times. So I'm concerned about the safety of having that road diet start right at 11 mile, and that I think that human nature, unfortunately, people get frustrated and they do stupid things, and unfortunately it's happening. And I've more than one time said to the passenger in my car, it would be nice if there was a Huntington Lights policeman sitting right there. Just go ding, you, pull over, get tickets. Because it is the way the traffic is now, and this is something we have to obey. And I have also seen multiple people cutting, off into the neighborhoods and going through the neighborhoods. You can just observe it. You watch them sit in a line for a while, and then you watch them pull out into the left-hand turn lane or pull or turn right, and they're cutting through and they're frustrated at that time. So they're also going a lot faster than 25 miles an hour. So I very much worry about children playing in those areas and kids on bikes in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. That it's putting their safety at risk with the road diet on Coolidge. And so I wonder how much of it, if you extend that road diet further down on Coolidge, will that increase the traffic even more through the subdivisions? And I know that they talk about it, that, people will go through there and then they'll realize it takes about the same amount of time as it does sitting there. Sometimes I don't think people think about that. I think what they think is, I'm moving, therefore I'm making better progress than if I'm sitting there. whether it's faster or slower. It's that perceived, I'm still moving, so therefore it's gotta be quicker. And then they tend to flip stop signs, and then, you know, because they're in a hurry. So I'm a little bit nervous about how this is affecting the traffic through the subs and stuff like that. That being said, in my mind, when I see that lineup going north on Coolidge, I'm thinking if you do the same thing along 11 Mile, you're going to end up with that long line waiting at 11 Mile to come across heading eastbound. You're going to have the same thing. You're going to end up with similar problems at that intersection of Woodward and 11 Mile, that you're going to have to neck that thing down a lot farther ahead of 11 Mile, you know, of the Woodward 11 Mile crossing, so that you don't have people coming through from Royal Oak into Huntington Woods and cutting off, and it's very scary to me that could very much happen and cause more people trying to just buzz through there and cut over quick. And I don't know how much your studies take that into account, not just, you know, counting the traffic, but human nature and what people will do when they're in a hurry.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, as far as the northbound Coolidge at 11, like I said, I was surprised the way the design turned out. I was just involved in the concept and not the detail of the design.
yeah.
If you look at going southbound, what they did at 12 Mile is what I would have expected they would have did northbound.
Right,
11
you
Mile.
cross over 12 Mile, and then you've got, like, you know, 50, 60 feet to, okay, now I gotta move over,
Right.
and it's a much smoother transition, and seems a little bit safer to me. That's just my opinion.
The other part I was going to say, certainly what I looked at conceptually, you know, when I model it, when you get to Woodward, just because that's, you know, a very busy intersection, it's MDOT controlled, I knew the odds of touching anything there were remote. So conceptually wise, I did pull it back where it's going to be transitioned back into its original geometry when it got to Woodward.
So heading eastbound on 11 Mile.
Correct, yeah, or even
And
going
how did you, when you
south,
modeled it, how did you have it when you're coming westbound on 11 Mile? You cross Woodward. Are you necking it down before you cross Woodward, or is your model after you cross Woodward, you're pulling it down in?
Yeah, after you cross Woodward, so I don't remember what distance I used, but maybe I went, 400 feet west of Woodward before that picked up.
Okay. Then, so based on so as you gave your presentation, I was waiting to hear, are you just presenting data, or do you actually have a recommendation? That you recommend they do a road diet, or you recommend certain streets are more viable than others? Did the study come out with a recommendation? It did not.
It just said
It's just data.
feasible.
It's, okay. It's just, that's all it said, is it's feasible.
I'll say that
It's
was.
pretty ambiguous, but okay.
That was my charge, so.
Okay, no, I'm just asking. I wasn't sure what you were asked to, if you were asked to come back with a conclusion, or if you were just asked to come back with, it's plausible.
So I think
Yeah.
the first step is we could do it, next step is should we do it?
Should we do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
No, not at all. Okay, that's it for me. Those were my, I just wanted to let you know what my observations have been, because I've been watching it.
Okay, yeah, again, I'm gonna go back and look at this, and, obviously, the last time I was out, school wasn't in. School was in, when I was first looking at it, late spring, so.
The upside I have seen so far was that when I wanted to stop at Little Caesars to pick up a pizza, I parked out in front on the street instead of getting stuck in their parking lot. That was the only upside I've seen so far. What's that? So there's that.
So they have delivery, right? So, Jill brought up some interesting things for me, because I don't usually go around Coolidge. I turn right and go up to Woodward when I go to work in the morning. And what I see on 11 Mile are people who are getting off of buses and rushing to get to the next bus to get their next connection. And that whole area around there is a difficult area for the pedestrians especially, and then we have the cyclists who are also trying to load onto buses, and people who are trying to turn right, and people are coming across Woodward, and not necessarily having the time to stop at the boulevard, but going all the way through and coming home from there. I actually witnessed a girl get hit by a car coming around the corner. Well, actually, they ran a red light, and everybody had unloaded the bus and were heading across east onto Woodward to get to the other side to get onto other buses. And she was just like plowed over. She was in the air and down. And when I talked to the police officer, he said, you know, there should be a right of way here for the bus. They shouldn't have to stop. And there's just so much going on there that it really concerns me to be narrowing down so quickly as people are coming across Woodward into the Berkeley Huntington Woods area. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about. I'm still wondering what the ulterior motive is for this, because people do need to get places in a timely fashion around here. And I mean, personally, if I lived on 11 Mile and people were going a lot more slowly, that gives them an opportunity to be eyeballing their houses and checking out who's home and who isn't and so forth. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but you have a lot more people randomly going up and down 11 Mile, 12 Mile, 13 Mile than you do going through the individual cities. So, I mean, if I lived on 11 Mile, I'd rather have the traffic going by more quickly so they don't have the time to really look in the windows or whatever. And that's just my point of view from that. I'm over in Royal Oak when I work, and I many times go down Normandy and over to Main Street, and Clausen has already done their road diet. And in the process of them getting it all worked out, it was a real pain to get anywhere around there. And I think that people are used to it, but I do see a lot of people cutting in through the neighborhoods to get beyond it because of the walkways, and you're going and all of a sudden there's an island in front of you and you better zip over to the side. So I would hate to see anything like that happening on 11 Mile or Coolidge. I just think there must be a better way to do it, to manage it, and I'm not sure what that is. So, and again too, when you go out onto 14 Mile, because they're trying to make that 14 Mile Main Street area into more of a cohesive city, but 14 Mile is so wide and there's so much space from one side to the other. All of a sudden you're like, stop, because there's all these flashing lights and you've got somebody who might want to cross all these lanes of traffic. And I don't know, it doesn't seem to work as well. It seems like Ferndale's got a little bit better thing on Livernois, but then the bicycles cross in front of the cars over by 9 Mile. So I don't know, maybe this community wasn't designed in terms of the amount of space that we have to pare down like that. Also, one other thing that just stuck in my mind, the idea of paring down in terms of the easement on either side of the street on 11 Mile, it doesn't seem like that's as wide as what we have in our neighborhoods. Is that going to be affected? Are they going to lose some of that space, that grassy easement that?
Yeah, usually you're looking in the same footprint, you know, curb to curb, you're
Okay.
using the same amount.
Because they don't have a lot to begin with, you know, that little buffer zone between the sidewalk and the street, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it could be reconfigured. Usually when these are done, they're low cost, pavement marking, signs are, the only thing that are included. We'll say backing up to some of your other points, where I talked about the 3 E's. I do the engineering part, but you gotta get the education and the enforcement part. If you don't have that, I don't know how well it'll work, and certainly had a lot of conversations with Clausen, particularly with the former police chief, because that was his concern. You just put these in and nobody knows how to react to them. Some of the things that have happened in recent years, so SEMCOG at a regional perspective has started doing more. You might have seen some TV spots, they've done some TV spots on, rules of the road, what pedestrians should be doing, drivers, bikes. I think that's helpful, but it really takes, a statewide, regional effort to get everyone educated. I actually worked in Ann Arbor for 10 years, and they were kind of, on an island with what they wanted to do, and it was really difficult because half the people that are in Ann Arbor every given day are visitors. They don't live there, so they don't know.
Okay. I understand that it would make it prettier and it would be safer, slowing the traffic down for pedestrians and bicyclers. I think it would take a lot of education for people to understand what all of that means. I'm with the seniors on that. When I go down Lincoln and then sort of jog over to head to Holiday Market, I cannot figure out what all that green paint is for, because I've never seen a bicycle ride down there anyway, but I don't know if that means that's their safe space, or that I'm not supposed to cross it if they're there. I don't know what it means, so I'm always very cautious. So, anyway, I appreciate all of your information. What happens next?
I'm not sure of as far as process, so.
Okay.
I think after this, we make a recommendation to the planning commission on whether we want to learn more about the feasibility and viability.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
I guess I've encountered some different problems going up Coolidge because I do go daily, and I see people just willfully not caring and still pretending like there's 2 lanes through Berkeley. And probably a lot of that comes down to signage. I think they just did paint without anything else. So even your southbound 12 mile where it does cut over, I think the police had put up some cones for a few weeks and then even took those down. So that's one of my big concerns. I think Royal Oak into Clawson, they did the installed posts. I think Birmingham did the same thing like in the rail district, but then DPW is going to have a problem come winter.
Yeah.
But unless there's something like that, I mean, people really need to learn. I also don't know what the green paint means. I just assume it, is some sort of safe zone. So, I mean, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I will say what they did, and I assume it's because they're looking at it as a pilot, was kind of minimal. They're looking at a minimal approach from putting in signage, I think, just so if it doesn't become a permanent project, they don't have as much to take out. But certainly that transition, that 12 mile, I think they kind of did the basic to begin with, and then they put the cones up when they had some problems, and now they're looking at, doing some more lane drop, merge ahead signage the other side of 12 mile, just to get the message through. I will say, as far as the green paint, I mean, it's just supposed to show a conflict or transition area for the bicyclist and the cars. Again, I don't think there's any education on that, so whether people would know. My personal opinion, I don't know that the green paint will last there. It was something that was done as an experiment, had positive results. The Fed said, yeah, if you want to use it, you can. And some people have jumped on it and used it. But it's pretty expensive, actually, in terms of when you're doing pavement marking, so I don't know that it'll be maintained. It basically takes, somebody out there with a roller by hand, and it's a lot of surface area, so.
That was actually going to be my next question: is can you do that the entire length of the bike lane? And that's not feasible.
And maybe once when you get the federal funding, but then when you got to maintain it, it's more difficult. So.
And then, did you say Berkeley's plan was to wait 2 years before they go back and restudy that section?
That's what their plan is. That they're looking at it as 2 years. I was at a meeting there a month or two ago about a different topic. I think they're pleased with the results in general, and I don't know that will last that long. That's what we've kind of talked about was we'll do every 6 months. I'm hopeful if everything looks positive after, a year and a half, that maybe that's sufficient, because certainly I don't wanna go out there and count everything every 6 months if I don't have to.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, I mean, I know that the overall, like, goal, one of the benefits of this is it's supposed to be safer, and that it just doesn't sound safer to me at all, in terms of a lot of the points that have been made here. I mean, for me, like, I agree about the not knowing what to do with the bike lanes, I just sort of look over and make sure not, but it's like, it's this big question mark there. I think that the area, I'm thinking principally on 11 Mile between like Woodward and Coolidge, it's so much traffic coming in off Woodward, like I think Jill said, like real, fast turning onto Woodward or coming across Woodward. I think people would not know what to do, and the amount of cars trying to figure it out that quickly scares me. I guess from a logistics standpoint, I don't know, and maybe this is clear, but like in terms of funding for it, like if for the road diet on 11 Mile between the Woodward and Coolidge, would we share that with Berkeley then, or is that okay? Yeah, I agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been made. I don't see a need for it now. I think that there are plans, talked about it in place for 11 Mile corridor down the road, and maybe some stretches will be more commercial than they are now, and maybe it'll make sense to reevaluate then. I just don't see it as a necessity now, and in fact, I think it sounds to me like it would actually be more dangerous. That's all.
To carry on that thought, maybe you can address that a little bit, Pat. Did you take into consideration that volume of traffic that would be moving across Woodward or turning right on Woodward into the feasibility, which you've presented as this is feasible to do?
Yeah, and like I said, I'm looking at kind of the throughput of traffic there, not necessarily looking at, if there's a transition from speed from one to the other. That whole area, I think, the devil would be in the details of the design. Where I had mentioned what East Point had done with 9 Mile and Gratiot, I kind of think of that as the same. Some of their issues there were where the bus stops were located, and they had put in these islands. The solution there, again, was going to be more to relocate where the bus stops were so that people weren't crossing haphazardly right off of Gratiot as traffic's turning fast off of there. But I could see a similar kind of approach there at Woodward. It'd be very similar, coming off the trunk line, higher speed. You got a skewed intersection. It's a lot of the same issues.
And if I understood correctly, if we were to consider this, we would be required to do more in-depth studies because of the volume of traffic, is that?
Well, I think what I had done for Synchro would satisfy that.
But it doesn't account for that.
Oh,
You
yeah.
account for the stretch and volume across the stretch, but not for the volume at the two main intersections, which I guess is my way of saying that's my biggest concern is both the Coolidge 11 Mile Connect and the Woodward 11 Mile Connect. I do see some value in a road diet for reducing the accidents, and if there's an opportunity to divert rainwater in the design of that as well, because that's another issue we've talked about a lot in this community. I don't know what that looks like, but I can see those values. I have concerns at those main intersections. And also had made a note there, speaking of bus stops, so the two legal crosswalks on 11 Mile in Huntington Woods are at Coolidge and Woodward. There are bus stops along the way. one at Newport and Cass, which is about halfway between the two. So if when we're trying to take those buses and get somewhere else, it's close to impossible to have to walk down to either one of those, or they're running through traffic, and I see it because I'm near those stops. So does SMART have any input or has had any input? Amy, do you know? Or any concern? I'd be interested to see statistics there. What's the usage? Are those in the right place? If we would consider it, are those the right places for crossing? I know that was not necessarily one of the ones you recommended. Scotia Mortensen makes sense to me too because of City Hall. And what else? Do we know Berkeley's position on a road diet for 11 Mile at all? And I guess I would say that I'm anxious to see, I don't spend much time on Coolidge either, so I'm not seeing the traffic implications there. I'll be interested to see your data on that if we can get more information on what's happening in the neighborhoods real time. And I'd love to see more of the data from our own public safety folks on what's happening at that intersection. I don't have much concern for the 11 Mile stretch overall as a road diet. I just, how we would handle it at either end, coming in and out of the neighborhood. I have some worries about that as well. But I do think there's opportunities there to make the rainwater diversion a piece and to make it feel more part of the neighborhood along 11 Mile would be, I think, a positive of it.
Okay. I think valid concerns all around. I probably have an unpopular opinion that I like this idea on 11 Mile. I don't quite get it yet on Coolidge, but I think that's here nor there for now. We'll take public comment, but Hank, are we ultimately looking at the end of this for a motion to continue the education, or do we even need a motion at this point?
The commission just said they wanted feedback.
Okay.
I'm not clear.
So we can informally communicate that back. We don't necessarily need to pass a motion to move this in any direction, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, can I
Yes.
ask a question? Is there any plans for change in the master plan along 11 Mile Road as opposed to what it is currently?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not yet.
But you are doing an update next year. You'll have opportunity to
Right.
look at that.
But currently, there's no 11 Mile in terms of training it in
It's not
either
in the
direction.
current master plan, and it's not in, as of yet, it's not in a future master plan.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll open up to public comment. If you could come up to the podium, give us your name and address. Comments are welcome, and questions, we'll kind of take them down and then communicate those one by one.
I guess I'll go first. My name is Kevin Howley. I'm at 25474 Wareham. And I think what's unique about Berkeley and why maybe they think this is good for them is that it's a very, the community is closer to where the kids and the families operate. Our kids are very active at Berkeley High, Hurley Field, Norup, the library, so we're flowing back and forth constantly. You know, if you're a Berkeley family, you're flowing within Berkeley. So I think that this has been a nightmare for us personally, the whole configuration. And I think also just the configuration of how Woodward and Coolidge flow. I do turn left coming south and go through the neighborhood and go across to Woodward because Woodward works at an angle and I'm at the side of the woods where it's just easier for me to do that. That's just the reality. I've seen not only going north on Coolidge, but also coming east on 11 Mile and trying to go north, the traffic gets stuck. And then nobody can turn coming down the other way or even go straight through. So it's not just the northbound part of Coolidge. So I think in terms of keeping this in mind, it's the configure of Huntington Woods. We are unique and our families flow into Berkeley and it just really becomes a hassle. The other thing I would mention is I have called Berkeley City Hall and the city manager is taking comment. And I know other families have it as well, so I would encourage Huntington Woods families to call because it does affect us and it does have an impact. So I was shocked to hear the 2-year plan. I hope it only lasts about another 6 months if it changes, but thank you for letting me make the comment.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Robbins. I live at 10775 West 11 Mile Road. I posted on Nextdoor about this plan, and I think last count there was something like 92 comments, overwhelmingly opposed to this. Obviously, I'm not in favor of it. During rush hour and either side of it, trying to get out of my driveway is next to impossible, as it is now. It takes 2-3 minutes to get out. And I can turn around and go nose out. Most of the people in the 100-plus homes on 11 Mile can't do a turnaround, and they have to back in. If you've got one lane and you want to go towards Woodward, trying to get out is going to be hard enough. Trying to go west is going to be impossible. It's just not going to happen. And there's bus stops. What are the garbage trucks going to do? You've got 2 sets of garbage trucks coming down the street. How are people going to get around them? It doesn't make much sense to me.
Thank you.
Jacob Umla, 10073 West 11 Mile. I like the idea. 11 Mile is dangerous. Like Huntington Woods side, the sidewalks are smaller there than they are in the neighborhood. The green space is smaller. Everyone's doing 10 miles over the speed limit. It's just dangerous. And there's no crosswalk. Like, there's no way to get across, and you have 4 parks and 2 churches in a mile. This is all kids and family stuff, and there's no way to cross. You know, it's just dangerous. I don't get the Coolidge part of it, but yeah, I do like the idea for 11 Mile.
Thank you.
Tom Franco, 26370 Humber Street. As I've heard some of the ideas here, all right, what we're going to do with the space, it's either more green space or permeable space. We waited a long time for 11 Mile to be repaired or rebuilt. I'm still getting over the kidney problems from riding the old 11 Mile. Removing the potholes has made it actually a little shorter. So I just don't see Huntington Woods interested, or the taxpayers of Huntington Woods interested in ripping it up for more permeable space. I think the cost of that would be astronomical. All right. Now, I know we've had some accidents, but the question becomes, what's the severity of those accidents? If there's a bicycle accident, the chance of it being fatal or very serious bodily injury is high. Okay? If we want to accommodate bicycles, I think there are ways to accommodate bicycles in the city rather than having traffic come into the city. So the bicycle approach to me just simply doesn't make sense. So what was the other, parking on 11. So parking was another concern, I guess, in Berkeley. Parking on 11 Mile is just not going to happen. People aren't interested in parking. So we're basically left with either the green space or the bicycle approach. And I think both of those, one has a very high cost problem, and the bicycles, there are less dangerous alternatives than coming to 11 Mile for bicycles. Okay? Now, another aspect is the left turn onto 11 Mile, okay? When I want to make a left turn onto 11 Mile, which I do fairly frequently, I always make sure that I have at least a quarter of a tank of gas, okay? And now if you take that traffic and put it into one lane, all right, I'm going to have to raise that to a half a tank of gas, I think, okay? So I know we're talking about the left turns off of 11 Mile as being dangerous. Well, the left turns onto 11 Mile are probably even worse because the people on 11 Mile aren't even looking for you, okay? You see? So, at any rate, let's see if I have any more thoughts here. Obviously, I'm not in favor of this. I think that the three reasons to narrow it, are either the green space, the parking, or the bicycles. Now, as far as the crosswalks are concerned, I have 3 grandchildren on Princeton and Berkeley, and we come to that park by Sam's, okay? And, I want them to follow the law, but I suggested to my son that maybe, that they should learn that early, and maybe he should walk them down to Woodward to the crosswalk down there, and I don't know, I almost had to make a citizen's arrest on my son, so I just backed off of that plan. The bus stops should have crosswalks. I mean, if we're talking about encouraging people to use mass transit, okay, we should make it easier. And now, one way to do that is with those crosswalk blinkers like they had by the Imagine Theater when the parking was right across the street. You know what I'm talking about? The pedestrian comes and just hits the thing, and Michigan law kicks in. You're supposed to stop for people in a crosswalk, and maybe that would work. Okay, so that's another aspect that might alleviate the crosswalk problem. I probably won't have any better opportunity to make this suggestion about traffic. I don't know why so many businesses on high traffic roads treat their addresses as classified information. If you're driving down Woodward or any of these mile roads looking for an address, they're all in different places on the buildings. Some of them don't even bother putting them on the building. I guess they think you're using GPS, but then you're looking at your phone instead. I don't know, maybe you can send this word along somehow. If they would just post the addresses uniformly on the high-volume roads, I think that would increase both flow and safety, because it slows down traffic to be looking, all right? And it's dangerous, okay? So there are several pertinent comments and one totally impertinent one. Maybe we'll move along. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Becky Nagaski, 13307 Vernon, and I'm 1 block off of Coolidge. I travel Coolidge all the time, and honestly, I think part of the problem with Berkeley is that it's isolated, and if we went forward and we participated with Berkeley and did 11 Mile and did Coolidge, people would get used to the idea and they would know what to do. The idea that seniors didn't know how to manage it in Berkeley, I'm not sure what that means, because I really think it's just a matter of following along. You have a turning lane and you have a straight lane. And I did like what you said about calming traffic, because traveling from 696, people are darting in and out all the time, traveling way too fast. Part of the problem, I think, in making left-hand turns, if you're caught behind somebody making a left-hand turn, then you're looking behind to see how you can dart around, where if you're nicely going your speed limit in 1 row with a turning lane, it's going to free things up quite a bit to have people be able to make their left-hand turns. I like the idea of making this appealing, maybe more green space, and maybe being appealing to bicycles. I think really it's a matter of having it all together so that people aren't just coming in and having this one little section. And so I'm in favor of going forward with it.
Thank you.
My name is Garnet Robertson, and I live at 10787 West 11 Mile Road. And I'm a little bit concerned about when you have one lane that you're going to be able to make left turns out of, because there are over like about 120 residences alone, plus the businesses, and all these have to have access at all times to get in their driveway. So you may be waiting to get into your driveway while the traffic clears, and somebody's coming behind you and want to go the other way, the same way. And so I think it's a real problem on 11 Mile because of the number of houses. The other thing is, again, there is no parking lane at all that anybody could park because it's just a 5 feet bike lane. So UPS trucks, there's an awful lot of deliveries now, mail trucks, moving vans. Nobody could, they'd all have to stop or else go in the middle lane, which then destroys the purpose of the middle lane. There's ambulances that my neighbor had probably 5 times for a relative, and they're maybe there a half hour, but there's no lane or anything there now, or won't be with the new one. So those are some of my concerns. Again, I think that was mentioned, the garbage trucks. You'd have just one lane, and you'd have people following in the one lane. That's all.
Thank you.
Susan Meinberg, 13130 Nadine. I live a block and a half off Coolidge. I certainly hope it makes Berkeley fix the problem at Coolidge and 11 Mile. That backup is ridiculous. It takes at least 2 light cycles to get through there. And most people are not going through the marked off lanes because who wants a moving violation that's going to be over $100? I don't understand why we would ever touch Coolidge between 696 and 11. We have 5 beautiful lanes of traffic with a center turn lane. It will take forever to get to the freeway. And yes, I have a huge concern. On Tuesdays, how are we going to get across 11 Mile between the buses and the garbage trucks? I think this is a terrible idea, and I hope you don't proceed with it. Thank you.
Thank you. I did forget something. Yeah, the 16,500 vehicles a day and the 750 per hour, you know, that's an average. There are hours where there's very little traffic on 11 Mile, okay? And there are hours, really bursts of traffic. That's what we really need to be concerned about. Another thing that we need to be concerned about, you know, I'd like to know what the peak hourly volume is on 11 Mile, in other words, rather than the average, because the average takes into consideration 3 o'clock in the morning, okay? If there is ever an accident on 696 or construction on 696, people are going to get off at Southfield, okay? And they're going to come right across here. This is going to be an alternate to 696 in those situations. And that is going to be chaotic, all right? Not just inconvenient, major chaos. So that's what my notes here were very scribbly, and I forgot about that one. Okay?
Thank you. Hold on, we've got a couple more.
Thank you. Sid Carden, 13307 Vernon. Hi, Martha. I'm in favor of the bike lanes. I'm a biker, and 30 years ago there was a big controversy on Coolidge, and we were here because the city was taking a big chunk out of our side of Coolidge, the Huntington Woods side of Coolidge, in order to create the 5th lane. There used to not be a turning lane on Coolidge. It was 2 lanes both ways. So we were here, we complained about it, we wanted Oak Park to share the difference, but part of our complaint had to do with, we didn't want Coolidge to be a faster road. We liked walking there, people walk with their kids, people walk their dogs. We didn't want Coolidge berm to be narrower, we didn't want it to be faster. And so along with what became the compromise, which was that Oak Park would take half of it and Huntington Woods would take half, we made sure the speed limits were what they are now. So the whole idea was to slow it down because people are driving through a residential community even though you're on Coolidge. There's playgrounds out there, there's kids there, there's the Montessori school or the small school, you know, they're linking drugs. So it's a pedestrian area. So the whole idea now in the 21st century is to slow down a little bit. You don't have to get north to Berkeley or Royal Oak that fast. I go on Coolidge all the time, and maybe it takes me 2 minutes longer to get to where I have to go. The idea is to slow down. The idea is to help the environment, part of the whole bike issue is to create less of a carbon footprint. I'm sure you're all aware of how serious of a situation that is, and it's small steps, but the whole idea is to create more of a biking community, less of a driving community. You don't have to go down Coolidge 40 miles an hour. You can slow down and do it in one lane. The idea is to move to a different way of living. So I'm very much in favor of the bike lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take the last comment.
One other thought was if you want to manage traffic on 11 Mile and consider crossing 11 Mile, put stoplights in. Scotia, Wyoming, whatever, wherever it makes sense. Stoplights will take care of the problem.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close public participation. That said, I don't think there were any direct questions, Amy, that came out of that. Is there more public commentary? Okay, and if there's no official motion to move forward, we will carry on to the next topic. Let's see here. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. Matter site plan review for the proposed addition at the Roche. Is that, did I say that right?
Yes, Roki.
Roche, residence at 25836 Dundee. When you're ready.
Mr. Chair, just so that before we get going on this, while people that were here for the just for clarification, a copy of the minutes from this evening's this evening's presentation will be made available to the city commission.
Okay.
So that it'll be communicated to them in that form.
Okay.
What it basically was, is because the way that this was put to us was that it should be done as a informational meeting, which I'm sure that you, me, the public has seen things, heard things tonight. So we'll be communicating back again with some more details then.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to close this out, so.
Okay, thanks, Hank. Okay, whenever you are ready.
Good evening. My name is Sevad Salamagic. I'm representing homeowners Damien and Jennifer Roki. I'm a general contractor for them. Originally, I was hired to do interior remodeling. In meantime, they came up with a plan to add a small addition because they really don't have an actual powder room on the main floor. They do have existing, which is unbelievably small, 3 foot by 6 foot, which doesn't meet any code. So I came up with this plan in front of you that would add a small mudroom and a small powder room in the back of the house. And then adding a second floor up on top of that with a small master bathroom. We are not changing the front of the house whatsoever or the south side. The main reason we're here, I believe, is because the code requires that the addition, if the majority of the material on the house is brick, to be built out of brick. We are proposing to do the second floor in ephes that would match the rest of the house. Only a little piece of brick above the first floor in this house, pre-existing to this addition, was the old chimney that goes above the first floor. So we are trying to maintain the look of the house to match existing completely. all of the windows on the house have been recently replaced. We are trying to match, not trying, we will match all of the windows with the existing ones. Actually, we would be only reusing or relocating 2 windows. I understand in my discussion with Hank that there's a couple of issues on these plans that they're kind of contradicting from one page to another. So I would, that's the, one of the clarification is the windows. We have proposed on one elevation a window that doesn't look like anything on the rest of the house, which is incorrect on these plans. They would actually match to the existing house. I think we had a couple of comments on this.
Yeah,
right?
when you're done, I'll.
The homeowners were not able to be present tonight. They're actually on a trip in Europe. So if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay.
I think that will be all from me.
Okay, you can certainly chime in after I'm done, so.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, at this point in time, I just wanted to, and I know that the plans were somewhat problematic to review and to take a look at. There was a few things that we had as far as what they would be allowed for square footage that were based on the plans, and the plans were not 100% complete. The window that Mr. Solomagik was talking about is located on sheet A10, where it's a proposed single-hung window. That was supposed to be taken out from the window that was on the lower section, which is actually 52 inches in height, so the dimension is wrong. The window is wrong, and it was supposed to have mutton bars and it's coming off of that, so that was wrong. The problems with that was that it was character details. So I couldn't give character bonuses if the character details weren't evident. There was no trim around the window as shown here, which was also another character bonus. Also, the height of this is 26.5, so they couldn't get the height bonus. The other thing too was that it says on the plan, proposed stucco, it doesn't say proposed ephes, and there is a difference between the two. So there were some clarification issues that we wanted to talk about over that. The ephes, quite honestly, that's the first time I've heard that, was just now.
I probably misspoke. I meant stucco. It would be matching the existing stucco.
True stucco?
Yes.
Okay, because ephes and stucco are two completely
No,
different
no,
processes.
not ephes.
The difference with ephes is that it goes over a foam board and it's lightly applied to that, and it's mainly foam board. The difference with stucco is that it's put on a lath and it's actually troweled on. It's a troweling process that goes on there, and it's substantially different. It's like a concrete finish.
Yeah. So we would be matching that actually. Yes. Exactly, not ephes. I apologize for that.
So the other things were is that a lot of the confusion for this came as like on the existing first floor plan, which is A1, which says existing first floor plan, and then it's showing all the walls that are going to be removed on the existing rather than on the proposed. So it became difficult to follow. Then when you went to A3, which was the proposed first floor plan, the only thing that you saw was a window change and a proposed sliding door and proposed window, but it didn't say anything that would reflect the changes that it takes to get to the proposed first floor plan. So it was somewhat problematic with that. So I understand if the planning commission has had some difficulty in going through this. And the second, where it says existing second floor plan, which is A2, it did the same thing, which shows existing roofing to be removed. So like all the existing floor plans show what is going to be taken out, which is different than what you're used to seeing. And then also on the proposed window, it says they're wooden windows with aluminum cladding, but I thought, when I checked the permit file on this, it was Hanson windows, which I'm not convinced. Are they all aluminum, or are they vinyl, or are they?
They're all aluminum.
They're all aluminum windows, so they're aluminum and they're not wood clad with aluminum?
Wood cladding interior with, wood interior with aluminum cladding
On all of
outside.
them?
On all of them.
Okay. And that was replaced fairly recently, so none of the windows in the original house are the same windows.
Correct.
So when it says existing, it's existing from a fairly recent window change.
They said approximately 4 to 5 years.
So that's the other thing. So I'm not quite sure where you would like to go with this. If you have any questions on that, on this, Mr. Solmagic can answer them to the extent that I can. I'd be happy to as well. The plans weren't real clear, so I understand the planning commission's frustration in reviewing.
So, do you think, in your opinion, the plans that we have in front of us are complete and accurate enough to make a decision, or should we consider tabling?
I think what you could do is table it. The only reason I'm saying that is that unless you wanted to make a motion that would have all the changes and all the clarifications in it, it would become problematic. So you might have like a 3-paragraph motion and a second on that, and then I would hate to miss something in that. I think what can happen is that he can clarify this and get him back to us on fairly short order. I know that he's got a lot of projects and he's in and out of town, but perhaps it's possible to get this to us with some changes.
Thank you. We'll start with Kim.
Thank you for clarifying some of that. I did have trouble following what exactly was being proposed. If I'm understanding it correct, it is a relatively minor exterior change.
Correct.
And I do appreciate the clarification on the window, because that was one of the items that stuck out like a sore thumb on the plans. And pardon me while I'm looking through here, I'm still trying to match existing to proposed on all of the elevations, and not having east or west or north or south is driving me crazy as I try to look at each page here.
To satisfy.
Yeah, I was just trying to look at the other elevation that's changing. I think I had seen the moving of the window up and adding of the casements where the garage door is currently.
Correct.
That fenestration looks fine. Where is the other change? I guess it looks like we're taking a window out on the other side, that may be the back side
Correct.
of the house.
Yes.
So we're actually removing
Yes.
that and adding in sliding doors downstairs. I'm not fond of that. On that second floor, removing a window, but it's not necessarily a make or break for me. I don't love the way the plans have been presented, but I think we can work through it and make a motion. It can go either way.
And I don't know which elevation this is on, I'm looking at A10.
Okay.
So, I understand the window on the second floor that Hank clarified will match our existing window, but what I believe I'm looking at, which is the new, I guess, living room on the left side, is that right?
Correct.
Why are we not, well, to me, the fenestration is not right on this elevation, like there's still, I would like to see a bigger window there, I'm just curious why.
Because on the other side, we would like to put in a sliding door, which is back of the house,
Okay,
so that they would have seating. If you look at the first floor, they would have seating on this side and a TV on the opposite. If that is what, we could definitely add a bigger windows if that would satisfy you guys.
yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be, if other people feel that way, to me, because that was the old garage, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Talking about that little.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a transom window.
To me aesthetically, I would like to see, a bigger window there. The only other comment I had, and this is probably more for the homeowner, and it's certainly not a deal breaker, but I just know the garage, the new proposed garage, I think it was like a 20 by 20. Is that right?
Proposed garage.
The new garage, because you're building, the new
No,
garage will be
we're not
detached.
building a garage, no.
No, but you have a set
Allocated, yes,
aside
allocate, set aside.
for the garage.
Future.
Yes.
Oh, for the future.
Correct, possibly, yes.
Okay, then never mind.
Hey, I know this is a little out of turn, Hank, but given the confusion here, I might go ahead and make a motion now to table this because they're too confusing. Can I do that?
Somebody else should make the motion as
Okay.
the chair. You certainly could entertain that motion. But the motion
I would
should be
entertain
for-
such a motion.
I'll move to table this until we have clarified revised plans.
I would second that.
My only comment about the motion would be whether or not, I mean, if there's other comments that might educate the applicant as far as what we might like to see. I will tell you that I can't vote for a plan that is, got as many holes. I mean, if it was just a matter of drawing in a window or doing something like that, we've done that before, but I don't like to do guesswork on the fly.
That's kind of where I am.
In terms of design. And there's no way I could vote based on the existing plan in favor.
I would maybe leave that up to you if you would like to hear the rest of the comments on what clarification we need, or if you think you're clear on what you need to come back with, because this is not going to fly tonight.
I would love some more feedback if possible.
Okay.
Like I said, this is such a small addition that I did not realize that it would be an issue as it is. I didn't think it was going to go in front of planning commission whatsoever. And
Well, it not only has to go before us, it has to go before the ZBA because you're over in size. You're aware of that, correct?
not really.
You have 2,917.7 square feet proposed, and your maximum permitted based on what I could discern from the plans was 2,850. So we had talked about that this afternoon, that you were gonna need a variance. And then also the height, 26, you don't need the height bonus if you can get 3 other bonuses for the architectural, and you did. But there's other bonuses that you don't get, and you need 1 more of those bonuses in order to not have to go to the planning commission, or to not have to go to the zoning board of appeals.
And what would that be?
I don't know, that would be up to you to have to pick one and work towards it.
Okay.
That's something that we can figure out between us, that's.
With respect to the garage, they're not gonna have room to build a garage with the lot coverage either, right?
Well, they're gonna be very close, but what happened is that the way that when you take a look at this, and you see what they have here, the proposed conditions include the new garage at 400 square feet. The issue is that the garage has to be 480 square feet by the set aside. So there's a difference in what is on here and what could be on here to help clarify that. So like that 80 feet will make a difference in the calculation for the square footage.
So you're already taking the 400
You're
into
taking
account.
400, but you need more than that.
No, but you're already taking that into account with the 26.9?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you'd like to hear more comments, we can certainly keep going around the room.
I hate to take up your time. I guess I have to redesign this and come back, right?
I think, and feel free to speak up, anybody else, but I think my advice would be to work real closely with Hank, make sure what you're presenting is real clear, and if you do want to go before ZBA for a variance, make sure you have a solid plan as to why.
I think part of the thing with this is too, is that I don't think that he's as far away as you might think, but I think that there needs to be some clarification and also some window sizes. There's some balance is kind of what we're seeing here, and that's what I'm getting back from the planning commission on this as far as what's where and that type of thing. And again, if the addition was totally in the rear of the house, which it's not, if the garage wasn't going in, it wouldn't even come before the planning commission, but all of this together makes it come before the planning
Yeah,
commission.
we'd ideally like this to be very clear in what's existing and what proposed is, and that's not the case.
Okay.
Jill?
Sir, I didn't get a chance to speak, and I would like to say, sir, that you have to understand that for us here, in order to be able to make a good decision for the whole community as well as the homeowner, we need to know exactly what's going on. This is a contract between you and the homeowners and us. And we can't possibly make a decision because we don't know what's existing and what isn't. I spent a ton of time going through and trying to figure out what exactly you're doing, and your clarifications help. But when push comes to shove, it all goes back to what's on paper. And what's on paper right now is not clear. So if you could come back with a set of plans that's showing us exactly what you're going to change in a very clear way, and showing the elevations in a very clear way, so we can really get a better visual image of what you're doing, that would be quite helpful to all of us. We have heard some things about your fenestration, for instance, changing the size of windows and so forth. And I agree, you've got to, get with Hank, because he can be a really good guide for you. But this just isn't clear enough. I couldn't vote for this at this point.
Thank you.
But I see what you're trying to get at, but it still has to be very clear and formal in the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Just from my point of view, I'm seeing on your existing first floor, I'm seeing you're taking out 3 windows, but I'm not quite sure what you're putting back in, or are we just gonna see big, long stretches of brick with no fenestration in it, which makes me a little nervous?
Well-
Again, I'm just telling you what I'm looking at, existing first floor, where it says windows to be removed, you're pointing at 3 of them.
Correct.
And then I look at the proposed first floor, and I think I see 1 window over the sink, but I'm not sure, and I see a big, long stretch of nothing on that first floor, which is, part of the old garage. Like, you took a window out of the old garage and didn't put anything back in. And then my other concern is, back here on proposed elevation 7, I'm seeing a small section of your roof that's EPDM.
Correct. A flat
Yeah.
roof.
How happy are we about EPDM roofs? How well do
Ask
they
the
hold
guy
up?
with one.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I've had some experience with them, and what's
There
the
is no-
intention? What's the intention of putting a flat roof in there? Having the EPDM up there.
There is no way to mesh these roof lines without a section of flat roof there. Due to construction of this house and a design of this house, to accomplish that little addition there, there is no way to do a shingle roof. The pitch is under allowed pitch. So the CPDM would not be visible from the street.
I'm not worried about being visible. I'm more concerned about the fact that it's going to leak. Yeah, they never leak, do they?
As someone who
Well, I guess, as long as they are aware of what they're getting into. And I'm just questioning, the design that forces into a flat roof. An EPDM, okay, but you might want to rethink how that is going to work. Just a comment. But I am concerned with things like, okay, I'm taking 3 windows out. Am I putting any back in? Not sure. Am I going to have big stretches of brick? Not sure. These need to be labeled with not just proposed elevation, but am I looking at the north elevation, the south, the east, the west?
Mm-hmm.
So I can get a good idea of, what's facing the street, what's facing the neighbors, which part's the back.
Okay.
It is a little confusing. And just a thing on A7, I'm not sure what I'm looking at here, which side, but I'm seeing a great big blank brick wall. And I have multiple drawing numbers that are named the same thing, so that makes it a little fun for me. But this is a great big giant brick wall with nothing in it. And is the green existing? Is the green something that's coming out? Is the green?
No, it's existing.
Why is it
A7.
green?
Because it sets further back, so it shows you that section of the house sits further back.
So you're trying to differentiate depth with a
Exactly.
different color?
Exactly, yes. So
Okay.
the big
Understood.
brick wall, it's actually a garage wall.
Yeah.
And then the green one is where the windows are coming out and being relocated on the other side. Because they used to have this old screening porch that they don't even know when it was built. that we're removing it because it was eyesore, look at it from the street.
Yeah, I get it, but you've turned that garage into living area, right?
Correct.
So you might want to have some thought process of adding some light.
Yeah, but you're adding big sliding door on the
I
back.
get it, but I'm not sure whose yard this is, who this is facing, and I'm just saying, you're modifying it, you might want to just think about.
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking at, you turn the page, and I'm assuming this is the back, and there's a big sliding door you're adding, but
Correct.
I get that, but anyway.
And then a transom on the other
The
side.
plans are confusing, and I understand that now that you're trying to show depth with the green, but it was confusing because I looked at other things you've got in green and then things that you're removing. So, yeah, there's an inconsistency in how you're presenting the information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll work on that.
My comment is just that I need to see all the elevations. I think we're missing one. So clearly labeled all the elevations. I also want to clarify, it's not a flat, it is a pitched roof, right?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I get
It's
that.
Not a
So,
flat roof,
Yeah.
but perhaps EPDM is not the right selection for that.
Well, it is
perhaps
reinforced
metal might be
EPDM,
better,
so
or a C-roof, something that allows, flow off.
they're fiber reinforced roofs. So you may have had bad experience with it, and it depends who is installed by.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're any different than shingle roofs.
It's your client, so.
Exactly, yes.
You make the determination for them. I was just questioning what was the point of putting an EPDM roof on, because it did look like it had some level of pitch to it, and though I understand that you have to have a deeper pitch to use shingles, there are other options than EPDM, that's all.
Thank you.
So, and my last comment with that is there's potentially a better looking solution
That too.
over EPDM. It's a very commercial look for a residential structure.
Yeah, but there is also cost involved in all of that, and they do not want colored roofs that will be.
Again.
So new EPDM product is fiber reinforced.
Yep, and
But-
and people like vinyl windows too, that doesn't mean they should do them, I'm just saying.
That's really their call to make, not mine. All I can do is suggest different products, and there as a homeowner, they can.
I understand, but part of your job is to think about the aesthetic of the house and how it fits into the neighborhood and what's going to be appealing on the house as opposed to just, it's cheaper, so let's use
But
it.
but that roof cannot be seen
Mr.
from
Chairman,
anywhere.
this back and forth isn't
I'm
helping
done.
the process.
Yep, I'm done.
Rick,
I'm all set.
Okay. Sheldon?
I've made my feelings clear. Until I get a clean set of plans in front of me that are understandable, I can't approve.
Thank you. Joe?
Agreed. Work with Hank.
Thank you.
I would also add, it's never a bad, I know they're traveling, but it's never a bad idea to have the homeowners present too, so they can kind of hear some of our reasoning if they're available.
Yes, there's trip was scheduled for months. I was, like I said, when we started this permitting process, I didn't even think we were going to go into a planning commission. So we were rushing, trying to get on this month's meeting. I did not realize how extensive this was, and I didn't realize that we were over the square footage until just today. So, like I said, otherwise they would have been here, so.
Well, Hank will be very helpful going forward.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start over with looking for a motion.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to table.
Table.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you.
David? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Have a good night.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
There,
Aye.
got the public
Oh, I'm sorry.
participation agenda item.
Anybody?
Can't do that.
They're figuring out.
Why isn't it a motion to conclude? An adjournment is to the next day. Sheldon?
What do you want from me?
Robert.
Just working.
You're the only other lawyer
Man,
here.
Robert.
Motion to postpone.
Well, no, it should be to end. Like we're done with.